Hey, Koukun. How's it going,
Hello,
man?
come on in.
Thank you. Wow, it's a beautiful place. So, 1 year later, eh?
Yeah, so we've been living in this home now for a year. So yeah, welcome to my crib.
It's fantastic, man. So, what's it like living here in Welland? There's some stereotypes on Welland. What's it like for you? What's your experience been?
Yeah, so I chose to move to the city of Welland. Obviously, I work as a real estate agent. We have a real estate team that does quite a bit of business here in the city of Welland. So when it came to look for a home to purchase, Welland was one of the options that we were looking at. This particular home, we found it because a client of mine actually was flipping this home. So he purchased this home, he was renovating it, and he wanted my opinion on selling this home after it was done. My wife and I came here to see it. We were going to film like a quick mid-renovation video to use in our video on the property. And while we were here, my wife kind of just tapped me on the shoulder. She's like, we should buy this home. And this was around the time there was crazy bidding wars on every single property. So if our client was willing to accept an offer before even the project was done, and us not having to have that crazy competition on the purchase, to us that was really appealing. So we talked to our client and kind of asked him, what kind of price were you thinking? We even were able to throw in a few upgrades. So we asked him to do like full soundproofing on the space between the basement apartment and our upper level. We asked him to, if you come back here, this deck was fully redone. It was like a beaten up deck before. We paid $12,000 extra for this deck. This was the time when lumber prices were insane. But the nice part is we kind of lumped it into the purchase price, so we didn't really have to pay it out of pocket. We just put our down payment and basically financed the rest on a mortgage. What other upgrades
Now,
do we do?
Koukun, I want to quick ask you. Now, your wife really wanted to get this property, and it sounded like you were open to considering you purchased it. But what were some of the struggles or things to consider before purchasing that maybe would have deterred you from doing so?
Some of the basics, we were trying to buy this home with a 5% down payment. So typically when you buy your own primary residence, you're able to buy a home with 5% down. Because I had owned properties in the past, for whatever reason, the banks weren't interested in giving me a loan with a 5% down. So that happened after we put the offer on the property. So we had to come up with 80 grand extra to use as a down payment. Luckily, we had some savings. I had some money set aside to pay my income taxes for the prior year. We used that for the down payment, and I had to save up money to pay off my taxes after.
Now, I want to quick ask you, that must have been a somewhat stressful situation. But how do you manage your stress in high stress situations that most people wouldn't typically be able to function in, like having to come up with 80 grand or just making this decision and being decisive?
Yeah, I think this particular situation was a little bit unique. So that was a time when everyone was putting firm offers. Because the project was not done, we were able to get a conditional offer done. So as a result, we had this time to work through the financing without it basically having a gun to our head saying we needed to buy the property. So we had the ability to walk away. Now in the market, there's a lot of conditional offers happening, which is a great benefit, I think, to buyers, which was different from last year when we purchased this property. So I think that gave us a lot of comfort. I think experience helps. Like I had helped a lot of clients through this same process. I had bought properties in the past, so on some level I knew we'd figure it out, and it was just a matter of like what sacrifices we were willing to make to make it happen.
Now, some of the benefits of moving here, have you experienced those yet? Or with the house hacking, are you looking to see the profits from that come 10, 15 years down the line?
A bit of both. So we just returned home from a 36-day vacation to Japan. That's a lot longer than I think most people travel in general, and it was kind of one of our bucket list items. We wanted to go for extended travel. This home costs us about $2,000 a month for our mortgage, our property tax, our insurance, our utilities. However, we have a basement tenant who pays $1,100 a month. So our real monthly cost is only $900 a month. This allowed us to keep our monthly expenses low for the past year while we've been saving up to go traveling, and while we were away, we only had to worry about paying $900 for this home, even though we weren't living in it. So that really reduces a lot of pressure and financial stress. And I think long term, I think this home already has probably gone up maybe 100 grand since we purchased it. So we bought it around 500. It's probably worth, even with the market cooling, it's probably still around 600 right now. So that's a benefit that we will get to use in the future. If we ever sell this home, we'll be able to make that gain. But in the last year as well, the mortgage has been paid down by close to 8 grand. And if you think about it, we're paying $900 a month to live here. Most of that $900 is going right to paying down the mortgage. So even though we're paying $900, we're not actually losing that $900. So it's a really cool benefit of house hacking.
So Koukun, is there anything elevating in your experience knowing that you're actually paying off something that your family is currently living in? So a lot of people equate a mortgage to a negative idea, but here you're talking about it as a positive thing. Can you give us a little bit more background on that?
Yeah. So for sure, this was the first primary residence that I'm living in. So for the last couple of years, I had actually been renting homes, and I think there's nothing wrong with renting if you are renting. But long term, after moving here, definitely my wife and I feel a difference to be able to own the home we live in, to not have a landlord that we have to interact with, and just to be able to make the decisions that we want. At the same time, I have to give credit for my wife. So I actually wanted to buy a house without a basement apartment, without renting out any portion, just to have a primary residence. But my wife insisted, look, this is sort of the first step. We've been renting before, now we're buying a place. Let's try to keep our costs low. Let's try to find a way to spend far less than what we can afford on the home that we live in, just to give ourselves some breathing room. And at first, I wasn't super excited about the idea, but I decided this is our first home. We can always sell it or rent it out and move on to another home if we really didn't like it. But since moving here, my mindset has actually changed quite a lot on that, because like I described, having my monthly costs be so low, having the rent offset our monthly expenses, and us being able to save for traveling, us being able to travel without worrying about paying a huge cost back home, even though we were away, that is a lot of freedom that I didn't expect. And in my mind now, it's hard to go away from this. So, we've been discussing, when does it make sense to upgrade? So this is still a starter home. It's not a huge home. Again, we want to stay here for a good couple of years, but when we move, I'm of half the mind that, let's get this beautiful, nice home, but let's still have a basement apartment so that we can still keep our costs low. I may change my mindset on that, but that's how much I'm enjoying having this benefit of having a basement rented out.
So Koukun, a lot of people are weary of renting out a space that they're also currently living in, mainly because they don't trust other people. They're fearful of actually getting a tenant. They're fearful of somebody living below them, making noise. Where do you learn to gain that level of trust and learn to actually look through the people and find, hey, who is the best option for living in this basement below us?
Yeah, so I think it is definitely a comfort level. Not everyone is comfortable with this. If you're currently renting though, I would look at your rental situation. If you're renting an apartment in a building, or renting the upper level or a basement in a duplex, on some level you're already sharing a home. So that's how I would frame it. My wife and I would be willing to rent an apartment or the upper level of a home that had a basement rented out. So why couldn't we own it, and the rent from the basement comes to us instead of a landlord? So that's the way we framed it. So prior to living here, we lived in a fourplex. So we were in one apartment, there were 3 other neighbors who lived with us, and we were okay with that. So if you frame it like that, it's a little bit easier to accept. I know many people want a single family home with no tenants or nothing to deal with, and there's nothing wrong with that either. But there are some huge financial benefits that come from renting out a basement or renting out a portion of your home.
So you mentioned you want to potentially rent out something when you upgrade. Is there anything that you would do different than you did prior to knowing what you know now?
So since we moved here, I think a big thing I'm realizing is we have a huge driveway. Probably can fit like 6 cars there, which is good if you're renting out a basement and such, but it sucks when you have like a snowstorm and you have to shovel 2 feet of snow. So the one thing is I'd probably not get as big a driveway. I'd probably get a wider one than a longer one. And I'd probably also get a home with a garage. This home, that's one of the downsides, we don't have a garage. So for our next home, that's something I will prioritize. Other than that, this home's pretty good. Like, one of the nice parts is we got a 2-story home, which is not typically what we'd recommend for an investor. But for me living here, I don't really care if the basement makes $1,100 versus $1,400. If it was like a bigger basement apartment, that extra $300 doesn't change my life, so to speak. It's nice just having that $1,100 a month, but having a main floor where we have a deck, we have private access to the backyard, we can sort of have a front entrance, a back entrance, loads of natural light, a main floor, a second floor. I think those were things that we wanted in our home. So that's something I'm happy that we made this choice instead of making a purely financial decision where maybe we get a bungalow where we can have a 2-bedroom basement apartment that rents for more, but we may not be as happy in our apartment. So by prioritizing our space, I think we made the right choice. And for the next home, I'd probably look at getting something a little bit bigger that we don't have to move from, because in my life I've moved so many times, I kind of want to just stop. I want to get a place that this is it, we're going to just stay here for the next 10, 15, 20 years and basically make it our home and not have to think about, oh, there's something missing that we're going to have to like upgrade to get. So
Koukun, can you talk to us real quick about the numbers of this property? Your mortgage, the rent that you collect from the tenant down below, all of your expenses. Can you kind of give us a rundown on that?
Yeah, so we pay about $1,315 for our mortgage payment. We pay, and everything else roughly comes out to around $700 a month. So that's our property tax, our utilities, our insurance, right, home insurance. So basically $2,000 all in, and then the basement brings in about $1,100. Of the mortgage payment, about $700 goes towards paying down the loan every month. So we are spending $900 out of pocket. We get to keep $700 in the form of a reduced mortgage, so the principal paid out. So truly, if you look at it, we're losing $200 a month by living in this upper level that would probably rent out for $2,200 a month. So we're getting a huge benefit through this sort of house hacking setup.
Now, you've given a lot of advice to people who are looking to do the same thing that you're doing, house hacking. Is there anything that you would do to say something to them, give them some advice, anything that maybe, hey, I learned this the hard way, I don't want you to learn this the hard way?
Yeah, so I think, like I mentioned before, it's important to look at a house hacking property a little bit different than you would look at an investment property. An investment property, it's purely the numbers. Does this property have potential to grow in the future? Those are important components of house hacking as well. You want to buy a property in a good neighborhood that will appreciate in value, but I would prioritize more, is this home right for you? Does it have what you want? What's going to make you comfortable in the long term? And use the income as just a supplement to make it affordable. So for example, in terms of comfort, we asked the seller and we paid him extra to fully soundproof the ceiling between the basement and the main floor. So that's a huge benefit to have, so that they're more comfortable. We are definitely a lot more comfortable. The con is that this wall behind us here was existing, and this is where the staircase is going down to the basement. So this is where we occasionally hear some sounds. But even this space right here, this used to be a entrance to the side door, and then you'd go down the staircase. We had the option of putting a door here, but we asked the seller to just fully close it off and soundproof it so that it's a permanent barrier. The side entrance is theirs and it's just closed off fully. And basically we just decided, like, this home, it doesn't make sense even in the future to really use the basement for ourselves. If it was, we may have gone with a door. We can always remove it. It's a bit of work to do that, but we feel that this home is probably better as an investment property if we were to rent out the upper and move to a bigger home than it would be really to use the basement for ourselves, because it's a small basement and it's really well finished as an apartment, but it's not a great basement for us to sort of put a couch and enjoy for ourselves.
Koukun, any closing thoughts about house hacking? Any messages you want to portray to people? Even the tenant side of house hacking? Anything you would like to say?
Yeah, so I think this is one of those things. So in general, I love finding a better way. So on a completely side note, I love collecting credit card points to travel affordably, to travel in business class for the cost of less than what it costs for economy. So my mind is just geared that way. And I would recommend for you, for example, living in a home. It's typically one of your biggest expenses. If you can creatively find a way to keep your costs down so that you can save more money, so that maybe you just have more money to spend on things that you enjoy, like traveling, just to have more flexibility in your life, that's what makes me excited. So if you're someone like that, this is definitely something to consider. If you're someone that just wants a stress-free life, you don't want the hassle of doing anything extra, you just want to buy a home and live in it, there's nothing wrong with that, right? I just feel it really depends on where you're at in life. So for us, we're relatively younger. We haven't experienced living in a single family home yet. So this is nothing new to us, so to speak. We don't need a complete home for ourselves yet, at least. In the future, I'm sure we will. In the future, that's something we'd be open to. So I just think the longer you can make these smaller sacrifices, your future will have more options. And that's the way that I feel I've lived my life, and it's really helped out in many ways. So again, you're sacrificing a little in the present to get a lot in the future is the way I look at it. So if you're of a similar mind, then maybe house hacking is for you.